Thank you for joining me this morning for the next edition of the Mark from Scratch series that we have been holding this year so far. Today we are looking at audiobooks. We're going to um, basically catalog from top to bottom. I am Britta Dorsey, your Development Support Administrator for Evergreen, Indiana. Please do not hesitate to contact me with questions, comments, concerns regarding um, this presentation, other presentations, not just for cataloging, especially for those who wear many hats. Um, I am always willing to lend a helping hand if you need it. Um, and then also, I didn't put in here, but I want to go ahead and mention it because I was reminded yesterday during the cataloging committee meeting that as catalogers and as part of the consortium, you have regional contacts for each of the committees in Evergreen, Indiana. So depending on which region, actually, let me go in here to this one, the regional support map first. This will tell you which region you are a part of in the state, and then we have the support. So in the cataloging committee, this is your list of committee members that you can contact based on the region you are part of. So if you ever have any questions that you don't feel comfortable sending through the listserv, you don't feel comfortable contacting me, or please feel free to reach out to your cataloging committee member contact, and they will be happy to assist you. And also vice versa, if you don't feel comfortable contacting your contact, you can contact me or send an email to the listserv. So I just wanted to remind you that there are cataloging committee members out there willing to help you in your region. So the agenda today, we are going to, well, I kind of changed it up a little so we would stop switching back and forth. So I'm thinking what we have is the bib record that's already in the catalog. So we will have that up, and then we will just go through and see how they cataloged it. So, but we will look at the MARC template that you have available to you for audio books. The resources that we have are the Cataloging Procedures Guide, which of course includes Evergreen Indiana specific procedures for entering MARC information into our bibliographic records. Information that I have taken for like MARC tags, subfields, all of that were taken either from the Library of Congress MARC 21 format link, as well as the OCLC bib formats and standards. And then of course, modified if necessary based on our own procedures. I have a link to, it's not really the interest group anymore, but the playlist. This is where I put these recordings. No, I have not posted the last MARC from Scratch recording yet. The useful websites for catalogers is just a list of, well, useful websites, hopefully useful websites for you, that just cover various areas of cataloging. So if you want to learn more about MARC 21 or look at MARC fields, these links can help. RDA information. If you want to learn more about authorities, there's links for that, and also for specific fields. So where you can get Lexile and reading program information. There's just a lot of information out there, and I'm trying to consolidate it so you don't have to go Google every time, which I still do, even though I have this list here. Also, the MARC fields in Evergreen, Indiana is just a little book, sort of. I put together it's like over 200 pages of the most common MARC fields that we use in our bibliographic records. It includes those fields that are required based on the the national core bib level requirements, and then it goes into each of those fields, indicators, subfields, and how they are entered into the record. And they also kind of break it down into separate formats. So there's a little thing for books, videos, audio-enabled books, everything like that. So I hope you find this useful. Yeah. So when we are looking at the enhanced MARC editor and the flat text editor, I just want to remind you that when we talk about undefined indicators, those are represented by blanks in the enhanced MARC editor. In the flat text editor, we use backward slashes. So you will see two backward slashes, one for each indicator. To tell us that these are undefined. And then delimiters, which help us separate subfields, use a double dagger in the enhanced MARC editor. And then when we want to start a new subfield in the flat text editor, we use a $sign. So the examples that I have in here, they are written in the flat text format. And then just to note, when we look at each of the fields, not all indicator and subfield codes are listed for each tag. Just the most common ones that we use in our records. To access MARC templates when you need to create a record from scratch, we can access the cataloging menu and then go down to create new MARC record. We are taken to this blank screen, but then when we click on this drop down, we see a list of all of the MARC templates that are available to us. Different books, audiobooks, microfilm, and all of these video games, and like Realia game for like board games, things like that. It doesn't cover all of the formats that our libraries may catalog. Like, for example, we don't have one specifically for like vinyl records, but I do know libraries say they take like the closest template, and then like for vinyls, they might use Music City and then just modify it a little bit to match what they need for that new format. So we select our template, and this is the example of the blank audiobook or the CD audiobook template. So this will give you the most commonly used tags in our audiobook records. These I don't want to say hashtags, pound signs. They just kind of are a placeholder. So when we do update these records, we want to make sure we replace those with the appropriate information. So in this, for example, the 306, these would be replaced with numbers. Same with the audio discs and the hour minutes. We'd want to replace that with the appropriate number. Today's cataloging subject, we are looking at the audiobook version of Random in Death by J.D. Robb. It was published and produced in 2023. It is the unabridged recording, and it is read by Susan Erickson. And you can access the bib record by clicking on the link from the PDF. And let me see, I probably need to re-add it to the chat. So there is that link. So let's click on that real quick. Let's go MARC edit. So we can see, make it a little bigger. We have our fixed fields filled out, and the MARC record itself. We have all of our information, including those 3x, 4x fields. And so let's get into where all of this comes from. The front cover, when we are just looking at the front cover of the item, we can determine the author, the narrator, and the title. I got this item from a library that has already cataloged it, so some of the information will be covered up, by the way. So from the spine, we have we have the author, the edition, we have the fixed field, like we have fiction here, so that helps us fill out a fixed field. We have the title, and we have publisher information. On the back cover, we have a lot of information, which includes the summary, author, narrator. There will be identifying information available to you, physical description, playing time, and publication information. The physical disc is another part of the resource. We can get author, title, narrator, publication information. It's all available to us from just on the disc and each disc. So we know when we are dealing with non-print formats that there might be a question of the preferred source of information. While we know that not everyone has access to, let's say, a DVD player to pop in a video or a DVD so they can get the title from the title frame when you're playing the recording, or put in each audio disc to confirm how um, how long they are actually. We do have the option for the preferred source of information to use the labels, the container, as the preferred source of information. So that is where all of the information that we are looking at today is coming from. So we are taking it from the disc, the disc label, the container, the cover, all of that. This is a list of tags that are required to create a core level bibliographic record. It's basically the equivalent of entering a 7 in the encoding level fixed field. We always want to strive for full level bib records. All right, let's start. We're going to fill in the fixed fields as we go, some of those, and then we will look at those completely at the end, and then we are going to go through all of these. So the first number is the ISBN in the 020 field. This is the unique number assigned to an item by its publisher. The indicators are blank, and we use subfields A and Q to enter information. The actual ISBN will be entered into an A, and then Q is where we enter qualifying information, which is especially helpful when we are just to help distinguish between multiple ISBNs or multiple maybe additions on a single bib record. So to transcribe the ISBN, we want to enter it as it appears on the item in hand if it is present, excluding any spaces or dashes. So in the bib record, they had it as, of course, we have those blank undefined indicators, no spaces for the ISBN, and the subfield Q for sound recording. Now they also have a second ISBN, which may not, I wasn't able to specifically see on the container itself, but I did use a website called isbnsearch.com, and I was able to determine that this is a 10-digit ISBN for the item. So, so this ISBN was included in the bib record. The next one we want to look at, actually, before we go, I do want to mention before, I may have already edited some of this, but before there was a 024 field for that included the ISBN number. The 024 field can be used or should be used when the identifying information cannot be appropriately used in other fields like the 020. So if we have the ISBN in a 024, but we also have it in the 020 because it is the ISBN, we don't need it in the 024. So just having it in the 020 because it's the ISBN is appropriate. So the Dewey Decimal Classification Number, we always need to have at least one in the record. The first indicator tells us the type of edition that the call number is taken from or built from. The second indicator gives us the source of the classification number, whether it is assigned by the Library of Congress or assigned by another agency. So we want to enter usually with print books, we might be able to find it on the TP Verso. They aren't usually readily available on audiovisual material, so we might have to go hunting a little or build it ourselves. The thing I want to point out, which I found, because when you look at the record, we have what I haven't really seen much. Obviously, I don't catalog as much as I used to, so this might be a little newer for me to see. But this was very confusing to me, having all of this extra information, and not just having the edition number in that subfield too. But what I found out, from the Library of Congress MARC 21 website is that this is normal to see. So if whether it's assigned from a printed version or an electronic version, like if you are pulling the information from WebDewey, we record the edition number, so that 22 or 23, a slash, the language of the edition, a slash, and the date on which the Dewey Decimal Classification Number was assigned by the cataloger. So if you see this, it's not wrong. So don't feel like you have to delete all of this extra, because based on the Library of Congress, this is actually legitimate. It looks really weird, especially since what we are used to, but it is legitimate, so don't remove it. Also, a resource is the Library of Congress catalog itself, because we know a lot of the audiobook may not have been cataloged, but the print edition was. So you could try to see if the print version of this title is in the Library of Congress and pull that classification information from there. And also, I always want to note, if you see like multiple classifications, so like in the 050, we have the Library of Congress classification number. Even if you don't use that classification number, don't remove it from the MARC record. The more information, the better, especially the more correct information, the better. So even if you don't use the Dewey, like if you've moved to like genre, it's always important to keep these in the MARC record. So based on this is why they have this number in the 0282 field. We have the classification number itself in the subfield A, and then in the subfield 2, we have the edition number that the number was retrieved from, the language, and the date that it was assigned. Moving right along, the next field in the record is the 100 field, which is the main entry for personal names. So this is where the authorized form for this item for the author is included in the record. When we are dealing with a single author with a surname, we will enter a first indicator of 1, second indicator is undefined, and then we use the appropriate subfields. To transcribe it, you always want to make sure there is only one 100 field per record if it is applicable. You cannot repeat it. So If there is a 130 in there, you can't have a 100 and vice versa. And remember that unlike the statement of responsibility in the 245 field, the 100 field uses the established or authorized heading. So this allows all of those published works by the same author to be linked by that specific name structure. So in our 100 field for this record, we will be using subfields A, D, and E. So and if we look up the name in the Library of Congress authorities, name authority, and remember when we are entering names for established headings, when there are initials, we always enter a space in between those letters. And we have, this is our author. You can see we have two different ones, but if we click on the authorized, first we have see also Nora Roberts, which is a great indication that this is the correct one because J.D. Robb is a pseudonym for Nora Roberts. So if we look at here, and we can see that it matches. So Naked in Death, which is the first book in the series, this tells me that this is the correct heading. So when it is entered in that 100 field, the established heading is used. We have the name with that space in between the initials. We have the date of birth with a hyphen in a subfield D, and then we've added a subfield E for the relator term. So they are the author of the item. So we just use the term author in the subfield E. And then the subfield 0, this just indicates that it has been validated and the system has found this specific name, this established name in the Evergreen authority file. So it has validated it and has linked it. So other titles by this author can be found together. Next, we want to look at the title statement in the 245, also the statement of responsibility. The title statement will consist of title proper and other parts of the title, so remainder, subtitle, things like that, if they are there. And then we also include the statement of responsibility, which is what is on the item. You know how we have in the 100 field, it is established, so it is a specific format. In the statement of responsibility, we enter it as it appears on the item. The first indicator for a 245, if we have a 100 field in our record, we want to add a 1 in the first indicator. If there wasn't a 100 or 1XX field, we would enter a 0. So this is why you see a lot of zeros in like audio or like film and television, because there's usually not a 1XX field for those. And then non-filing characters in the second indicator. So if there are not any beginning articles, we would enter a 0 or enter a number appropriate with that, that article. So in ours, it's pretty simple when we look at the, like, even if whether we're looking at the container or the disk, we just have an author and title statement. So we will just use the subfields A and C. So when we enter it, we have that first indicator of 1, second indicator of 0 because the title does not start with a, an, or the. And we have random and death. It is entered in, I'm going to say this wrong, I know it, in sentence case. I always get them mixed up. I'm pretty sure it's sentence case. So we capitalize the first letter and then like proper nouns, but everything else is lowercase. And then in the subfield C is where we enter the statement of responsibility. Notice how we don't have to enter a space between the initials. And then we use a terminal period at the end of subfield C for the 245 field. Next is the edition statement, which is information relating to the edition of a work as determined by applicable cataloging rules. The indicators are undefined, so we will just use the subfield A in this example. So for we transcribe the edition statement as it appears on the source if it is available. We can use if it says unabridged version, edition, we can consider that an edition statement for audiobooks, which is why in our 250 tag, we have unabridged in a subfield A, which remember, it is listed on the spine of the container. Next, let's look at publication information in the 264 field, which is just a statement relating to the publication, printing, distribution, etc., of the item. And if you remember, I can probably remove this part at this point, but the 264 replaced the 260 field, which is what we used to use. It replaced that, so now we only use the 264 to enter publication information. For the first indicator sequence of statements, for the most part, you will basically always see it as blank because it will be the earliest published version. And then in the second indicator, we mostly just use the 1 and 4 for publication and copyright date for our 264 fields. 264 subfield A is for the place of publication, so where the publisher is located. We enter it should correspond with the country code that we enter into the country fixed field. And it should match your item in most cases, but allow for variations within the same country between printings of the same edition. For the subfield B, which is the name of the publisher, we want to enter the name as it appears on the preferred source. We precede the subfield B with a space, colon, space. Again, should match your item in most cases, but variations may occur, et cetera, et cetera. Subfield C is the date of publication. We want to enter that into the subfield C. It is preceded by a comma, space. When we are dealing with the publication, like the full publication information, the subfield C, what we enter into that subfield C should match the date that we enter into the date 1 fixed field. And then the subfield C in the record should match your item in hand unless the date is in brackets, or it has question marks. We use brackets when we infer that an item was published in this year based on the copyright date. If we find that our item does not have a published date, so usually it'll say published in 2023, and then like copyright 2023. A lot of times you might just see the copyright date. If that is the case, we can infer that the publication date will be the same as the copyright. So we would enter that publication date in brackets into the subfield C. And then we would enter the copyright date that we have in a separate 264 field with a second indicator of 4, and then use a subfield C to enter the copyright date that we have from the item. So this is the copyright notice, we would use a second indicator for, and then when you use a second indicator for, the only subfield you can use is the C. So in our example, or in our item, we have New York and Macmillan Audio as the location of the publication and the publisher name. Since the item itself does not have a published date, they entered that into brackets. They inferred it from the production copyright date. And then for audiobooks, instead of using the copyright symbol, we use the phonogram symbol. I have not been able to find a shortcut for that, so I usually just copy and paste it from Google or from another record in order to get that symbol in there. The 264 with a second indicator of 4, they do not end in a period, so you will leave that kind of empty. So it's just the symbol and then the date. So let's move up back to the fixed fields, the type of date that we are dealing with, and then the actual dates. Because we have an inferred publication date and a copyright date, we are going to use a T in the DTST fixed field, and then we are going to enter the inferred publication date into date 1 and the copyright phonogram date into date 2. It does look weird because you are like, I always ask myself, what's the point in repeating the same date? It's the same date. But since we are inferring that publication date, it's important to make sure we have those separate, even though it's the same in the date 1 and date 2 fixed fields. Physical description. This is used to physically describe the item, dimensions, and any accompanying material. We always want to make sure the information in the 300 tag matches our item in hand. There are limited exceptions, and we do allow for varying styles of entry. So like pages versus P, things like that. Indicators are undefined, and the most common subfields you will see are A, B, C, and E. We transcribe it. We want to enter the appropriate physical characteristics in the 300 field. We don't have any accompanying material for our audiobook, so we do not need to use a subfield E. And then, of course, we always want to make sure we take all of the discs in the container into consideration when we are trying to determine whether or not it is a match. Oh, Monica has, oh yes, there is an extension for Chrome that if you are able to download that, you can find the phonogram symbol. And I'm pretty sure Monica has said that a number of times before, so thank you for the reminder. So for our item, there are 11 physical discs in the container, and we use the term audio discs in the for like compact disc, we use audio discs in the 300 subfield A. So I messed up. This should be, I'm pretty sure there should be a space in here. In parentheses after that is where we enter the time. And since we are using the container as our preferred source, now we see here, or if you look at the container, most of the time people will take the time below the ISBN because it usually has like the running time, the number of discs, and probably a price. But it also has running time of 13.5 hours in the copyright information. So unless you actually run the information like the discs in a computer or CD player, if those still exist, then we could probably safely assume that one of these is correct. I think because I have this on digital, so I was able to kind of use a calculator. I think it came out to around 13. But if we're taking it from the item itself and it says 13 hours, 30 minutes, then we can probably safely assume that it is 13 hours, 30 minutes. But always check your container. And we do know that not all of the time that the publisher does not always put the exact time on the case. So we are able to allow up to, I believe it's 2 or 3 minutes difference when we are dealing with audiobooks and like film and television. Now, this is a big difference, 13 hours, 30 minutes. So you could try to find other sources. For example, the Blackstone Library page, I believe said, it might have said 13 hours. So if you can confirm it says 13 hours and it says both on the container, we could probably change this to 13 hours. Anyway, let's continue. So in the subfield B, when we are dealing with CD audiobooks, we want to include CD audio in the subfield B, a comma, and then include the term digital. In the subfield C is where we enter the dimensions. So we are not taking dimensions of the container, we are taking the dimensions of the disk. And at this time, we still use inches. So in the subfield C for disks, we are entering 4 3/4 inches. 306 playing time. This is included in audiobook or yeah, non-musical sound recording, probably. MARC records. So this denotes the running time of the sound recording, video recording, etc. We only use a subfield A and is required if the 306 is included in the MARC record. So if you see the 306, then we need to make sure we add that. Indicators are undefined. And the format that we want to make sure we follow when we are adding playing time is it's represented by hours, minutes, and seconds. There's no spaces. So the first two numbers are to represent the hour. The third and fourth are for minutes, and the fifth and sixth are for seconds. We don't use punctuation in the 306 field. So based on this record, we have 13 hours, 30 minutes. So we would enter a 13, 30, and then 2 zeros for the seconds. Let's say if it was 45 minutes long, then there would be 2 zeros, 4, 5, and then 0, 0. If it says 60 minutes, then we would just make it an hour. We would make it an hour, period. This is just a list of the physical and digital characteristics. This is included, thankfully, in our templates. So if we have to create something from scratch, these should already be entered. So yay, we don't have to memorize all of that. Series statement, this is included because this title is part of a series. The 490 is used for the series statement that is taken from the item or an external source. And since this is an established series, we are going to want to trace it, which means we are going to enter a 1 into the first indicator. Second indicator is undefined in the 490. And then the most common subfields that you will use in the 490 are A and V. If you are dealing with an omnibus item, you might use a subfield 3 to help differentiate between the different titles in the series. Again, we want to transcribe the name of the series exactly as it appears on the item in hand. It can be taken from anywhere on the source. It should be written in sentence case. Yes, I got it right. We don't enter a terminal period in the 490 field unless the field ends with an abbreviation. So most of the time, because we usually end it with a subfield V, there won't be a period. If any part of the series information is taken from outside of the chief source, we will enclose it in brackets for each subfield where it is needed. So in our example, we took the series name from the title because all of the books in the series start with a different word and then in death. So they added that into the subfield A, but they didn't have the number it is in the series on the item. So it was taken from a different source. So that is why it was placed in brackets. General note, when we do use brackets in our 490, we want to make sure we include a source of where we got that series information. And we just use a general note 500 field. Indicators are are left blank, and we use a subfield A. So for this one, we just enter where we got it. Since we just got the number information, we just have a series numeration taken from, and then the source. In this example, it was taken from Novelist. We always want to make sure, this is a recommendation from the online Audio Visual Catalogers Inc. Group, that we want to always include a title source for our items that are not, that when it is not taken from the title page. So basically any like audiovisual item. Again, general note 500 field, the indicators are left blank, and we took the title from either the container or the disk surface, and that is what we enter into that subfield A. Another general note we want to include when we are dealing with CD audiobooks, when we use the term audio disc in a 300 subfield A, we need to enter the term compact disc or discs in a 500 general note field. If we are dealing with an MP3 audiobook, we want to include the MP3 format information. So in this example, they included the 500 and with compact discs in a subfield A. The next 5XX field we want to look at is the 511, which is for the participant or performer note. We have an audiobook, so obviously someone had to narrate it for it to be recorded. So we need to record that information. For the first indicator, when we are dealing with narrators, so non-musical sound recordings, we are going to use a blank. We are going to leave that first indicator blank. The time you will use a 1 in the first indicator is when we are dealing with like film and television, when we are listing the cast. Second indicator is undefined, and there's really only one subfield that we will use for the 511, which is an A. And then we also want to make sure, as we transcribe it in the 511, to make sure to remember that we should also include a 7XX field. So in our case, a 700 because it's a personal name. So we have, oh, well, that's even wrong. So we have the blank indicators, and we have what is written from the item, so read by Susan Erickson. There's always something that I miss. Since we have dealt with, so let's just go ahead and look at the audience fixed field. Usually, when we're dealing with the 520s, we tend to add audience information. But since we don't have any specific for this, we can move or go ahead and include the audience fixed field. For this, since this is a book or an audiobook that we have in the adult collections, it was published for adults, we are going to use the letter E for adult in the audience fixed field. So also note, we also use an E when we are dealing with rated R and unrated movies. Anything else, so the G, PG, you can use J, or if there's a more appropriate letter in the fixed field, use that. But E should only be used for books and audiobooks in the adult collection, and audiovisual material that has been rated R, TV M rated, or unrated movies. Question, do you always use read by, or is it okay to use narrated by if that is what the container says? I go by what the container says. So if it says read by, which is what the container is showing me right now, that is what I write. If it says narrated by, then that is what I write. So if it's whatever's on the container, yes. 520, we always want to try to include a summary of the item. The first indicator is blank for the summary. And we use a subfield A. So this is it is the summary. Now let's look into the subject access fields. So these are established headings that describe what the item is or what the item is about. This includes personal names, corporate names, uniform titles, topical terms, geographic, which I did not add there, and genre form headings. So in our record, we have a 600 for personal name. We also use 650 for like subject added entry for topical terms. We also have a 651 for a geographic name and a 655 for genre form index term. For the 600 personal name, a lot of times we start with a surname depending on the name. So in our example, we do start with that surname. So we are putting in 1 in the first indicator. The second indicator tells us where this heading came from. Is it part of the Library of Congress subject headings? Thesaurus. Did you get it from the Children's and Young Adults subject heading thesaurus? Is it a Canadian subject heading? You would enter it, the appropriate thesaurus number into that second indicator. A lot of times you, especially for genre form headings, you may see a 7, which indicates that where you got that established heading is from something other than what is listed here. So we would need to, whenever we have a 7 in that second indicator, we always want to make sure we include that subfield 2 to specify where we got that heading. You'll also see it in subject headings, like when we're dealing with FAST or GSAFD headings, things like that. So, and then we have the different subfields. When we also use in the 6XX fields, or at least all of them but the genre form headings, we also use subject subdivisions. So this allows us to narrow down the subject even more or specify certain like geographic or things like that. Topical terms, there's no level of subject in the first indicator. Second indicator is the same. It's for the thesaurus. And we have the main term portion and subject subdivision. Geographic name, same, undefined first indicator, thesaurus is the second. And then the genre form term, first indicator is going to be blank because it's a basic type of heading. A little different, well, not really different. Second indicator will have the thesaurus. There are the same thesauri as the others. I just included the 0, 1, and 7. So a lot of times you will see a 7 for the genre form term. So in our record, we have several. We have a 600 field to list Eve Dallas, which is a fictitious character in the book, and we use a subdivision subfield V for fiction. We also go into other topical headings, so police women in New York, murder investigation, teenage girls, and then a subdivision of crimes against. We have our geographic heading for New York, and then we have a couple genre form headings. So we have detective and mystery fiction. We have that second indicator of 7, so we have that subfield 2 with the thesaurus code. So LCGFT, which is the Library of Congress genre form thesaurus. Same thing for thrillers. And a good thing, or it's important to remember that these are all established headings. So when we were talking about the 100 field, these also need to come from an established heading. And we need to make sure we have at least one Library of Congress subject heading in our records. For audiobooks, we can include the form heading audiobooks from the LCGFT. Just make sure we include that. And then, of course, all of these subfield zeros means that these headings were validated in from our Evergreen authority file. Next, remember we added that 511 for the narrator. We wanted to make sure we added a 700 personal name for linked entries as an added entry because someone else might love Susan Erickson narrating, so they might try to find other titles narrated by her, which I'm sure she has narrated things other than the other 57 in-depth books. But for the 700, again, this is an established heading. So we use a first indicator of 1 for the surname. We will use a second indicator blank, and then we have the subfields that we will use based on the established name. And thankfully, with established headings, it usually tells us what subfields to use. So like, for example, that JD Robb one, it told us we needed a subfield D for the date of birth. So in this, our 700 field, we will use the subfields A and E for the relator term, and we will enter it as it appears in the established heading. So Erickson, comma, Susan, and then that subfield E for the relator term as narrator. 800 field is the series added entry. We traced that 490 field. So we need to make sure we include an 800. We're using an 800 because this series has been written by a single author. So we are going to use a personal name title heading. So we use a 1 for our first indicator because we are using the surname and then the appropriate subfields. Now for this one, we are using subfields A, D, excuse me, T, S, and V. So it is entered as such into that 800 field. I do want to note that sometimes, now not all of the audiobooks, like with series, they will have a subfield S established heading. So just make note of that. And then also sometimes it validates the wrong heading. So I've been kind of troubleshooting with this when I update something in the record, or like if I removed, because this was originally pointed at the print series name, but this is an established heading, so I wanted to make sure it points to that. I keep saying heading, but it's the established heading. But it seems to, when you first enter it, it seems to validate to the wrong heading. So just watch that because it's not correct if it's pointing to the one that just says in-depth novel, no spoken word. It's incorrect. Other fixed fields, since these kind of just are there, this is what we want to make sure we fill in when we are dealing with audiobooks. A number of them are not applicable because a lot of these fixed fields are used for musical sound recordings. So, for example, the form of composition would be NN for not applicable. Like other ones are like, I think one is for ballads and like rock and things like that. And then we always want to make sure we include a 007 in our audiovisual material. For sound recordings, we have this. I did not update that, but it is what is right here in that 007. So this just breaks down what each of these, what's the term? It's very similar. It's similar to the 008 where each character has a specific location. So each of these codes, and thankfully we have the physical characteristics wizard, which helps walk us through all of these and gives us the options that we need. So like the tape width configuration, those are not applicable because we are dealing with a disc. We don't have an actual tape. Are there any questions? Thank you, everyone.